Do you love Korea? Perhaps you've dreamed of visiting Seoul, or maybe some of you have been there countless times already. Anyway, this is one of the most expensive and elite residential complexes in Seoul. It's where the wealthiest people in Korea live. And yet, this is also one of the most hated places by the local residents. Its name is Acrovista, but the thing is, right here, where the richest Koreans now reside, one of the most terrifying and massive tragedies in South Korean history unfolded. One of the favorite pastimes for people in Korea is shopping. Many know that Korea boasts some of the most unusual stores in the world. I think if you've been to Korea, you'd definitely agree. Seoul is called the most stylish city in Asia, and not without reason. Just look at this, a bookstore in Seoul, the House Nowhere store. And this isn't an art gallery, it's the Innisfree cosmetics shop. It's literally a work of art. In Korea, they really strive to amaze shoppers so they'll come back specifically to them. And that's how it's always been. The doors swing open for visitors at a brand new, soft pink shopping center named Sampung. Balloons float in the air, music plays, smiles beam from the staff in their beautiful uniforms, and excited shoppers bustle about. Truly, a happy day. Before this, nothing like it existed in Korea. It was the largest shopping center built at the time with the biggest number of stores. On the first floor, luxurious boutiques offered high-end goods. Higher up, clothing and electronics were sold. Basically, it was all pretty standard. The fifth floor housed a food court. Overall, a classic mall just like anywhere else in the world, I suppose. For 5 years, the Sampung department store operated successfully and remained popular among Seoul's residents. Until one fateful moment. Even though it was the 1990s, Sampung had air conditioners installed. And usually it was quite cool inside. But on that sweltering summer day, June 29th, the air conditioners weren't working. "Why is it so hot in here today?" customers asked. "Unfortunately, the air conditioning has been out all day," the staff replied. Sellers began whispering among themselves, grumbling about the heat in such an elite shopping center. That day, rumors spread among the sellers that the fifth floor had been closed off for some reason. But on the other hand, closed is closed, who knows what was going on up there? They just kept working. The next rumor that circulated was that some escalators had shifted oddly. They seemed crooked somehow. Then, suddenly, a loud noise erupted from above, and it felt like the whole building shook slightly. Everyone thought it might be an earthquake tremor. Eventually, everything quieted down, and life went on. Sellers kept selling, buyers kept buying. The staff remained calm because they knew this was an elite shopping center. If something truly dangerous happened, management would surely warn them. They would evacuate everyone if needed. They trusted the leadership 100%. Surely, everything was under control. 10 minutes after the first shake, another loud noise came from above. This time, deafening. People on the first floor felt a strong jolt, followed by a sharp, powerful gust of wind right inside the building. Now they realized something was wrong. Panic set in as they rushed toward the exits. But just seconds later, the unthinkable happened. Right before their eyes, starting from the fifth floor, each level began collapsing onto the one below. And then total darkness. In about 5 seconds, the Sampung department store crumbled to its foundation, burying everyone inside. Looking at how the collapse unfolded, it's hard to believe anyone survived at all. But there were survivors. One girl named Yoo Ji-hwan, who worked on the first floor that day, lived to tell the tale. She described how pitch-black darkness suddenly enveloped them. It was so profound that it didn't matter if your eyes were open or closed. Nothing changed. Utter void. She couldn't move her legs. Her forehead was pierced with a wound so large she could fit a finger inside it. Yoo Ji-hwan also recounted smelling the overpowering scent of blood and hearing cries for help. Survivors later said they wondered if it was an earthquake or if war had broken out, because they heard what sounded like hordes of soldiers marching above them. They could hear ambulances wailing, they heard everything, but no one heard them. Outside the shopping center, chaos reigned. No one understood what had happened. Why had the sturdy building suddenly collapsed? Was it an underground tremor? An explosion inside? No one knew. They only saw the aftermath. Seoul's most popular shopping center, Sampung, had turned into ruins in mere seconds. Ruins that continued to groan and crumble as concrete slabs kept falling. There was complete uncertainty and shock. A massive crowd of relatives gathered, families of employees and visitors alike. They screamed, demanding any information about what had occurred. They desperately wanted to know if their loved ones were alive. Some people, in their desperation, started digging through the concrete debris with their bare hands. They were in such shock that they didn't realize it was futile in such a massive structure. But their despair was all-consuming. You can understand their pain. The rescue operation began. In the first minutes, rescuers were at a loss. The destruction was so immense they didn't know where to start. They approached the ruined walls and shouted, hoping to reach any survivors with their voices alone. But silence answered, because those trapped below could hear the rescuers, but many couldn't shout back. The weight of an entire building had just crashed down on them. Many were unconscious. Others were dead. The rescue effort was poorly organized, everything moving agonizingly slowly. Yet, in the first hours, rescuers began finding survivors and rushing them to hospitals, which filled up at an alarming rate. The hospitals weren't prepared for such an influx. It was true pandemonium. As I mentioned, there were survivors. But the problem was that even if someone lived through the initial collapse, they were trapped deep under heavy concrete slabs. Imagine being stuck in a cave. Even when rescuers know exactly where someone is, it's not always possible to extract them alive. It's incredibly complex work. For example, the famous case of Nutty Putty Cave with John Jones. He got stuck at a 70 to 80 degree angle and died the next day because his blood pooled in his head and chest, pressuring his lungs and heart. He lasted 27 to 28 hours in that position. Now, multiply that by the number of people in the Sampung collapse. How many were in positions where prolonged immobility was fatal? Time was ticking by the hour. Rescuers needed to act with maximum speed and precision to save those under the rubble. Survivors later described how time dragged on endlessly. They all had injuries, broken bones for some. Imagine lying there, unable to move arms or legs because there's no space. Many ordinary people, upon hearing about the Sampung disaster, grabbed whatever tools they had and rushed to help clear the debris. Anyone with useful equipment showed up. They risked their own lives for strangers, showing incredible nobility. But there's a disgusting detail amid this. While people lay trapped, their lives hanging by a thread, looters descended. Yes, hordes of marauders gathered around Sampung. They sneaked into the surviving sections and stole money, jewelry, clothing, electronics. While everyone's focus was on saving lives, these scum pillaged what remained of the store. Around 800 looters were arrested. Imagine about 800 people chose to rob instead of help. I'll never forget that woman, because it was obvious she had stolen a whole pile of fur coats. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but she stole those coats right in front of everyone. One volunteer who arrived at the collapse site was a builder. He noticed something odd in the ruins. A broken foundation pillar, roughly speaking, one of the support columns that held up the building. It seemed too narrow for such a massive structure like Sampung, and he saw only 8 metal rebars sticking out of it. I'm not a builder, but this man said there should have been at least twice as many, 16 or more. With only 8, the column was severely weakened. He suspected this wasn't an explosion or earthquake. There must have been serious construction violations. Day 2. By morning, over 200 survivors had been pulled out, but more than 600 were still missing, neither alive nor confirmed dead. However, the mayor of Seoul halted the rescue operation. He declared there was no hope of finding more survivors. Imagine the relative state. They hadn't slept all night, staying near the tragedy site, waiting for news, and suddenly, the work stops. Many believe to this day that if the mayor hadn't given that order, more lives could have been saved. Those hours were critical for some. The mayor faced furious criticism from everyone. Over 500 relatives protested, and the rescue efforts resumed. Later, the mayor claimed he never gave such an order. It was all rumors. Anyway, the important thing is that work continued. If not for those protesters, Yu Ji-hwan, buried 10 meters deep under concrete slabs, might not have survived, and we wouldn't know her story. She wasn't found for a while yet. I thought a lot about how short my life had been, about all my loved ones, friends, and especially my mom. Yes, the operation continued, but eyewitnesses say it was still poorly organized. No one knew exactly what to do or how best to proceed. A logical question arises. Why not use heavy machinery to clear the debris, like excavators? The issue is that placing an excavator on the ruins could crush any survivors below under the added weight, which was already immense on their bodies. Yu Ji-hwan said she was sure she'd lose her legs because when she heard an excavator starting above her, she felt unbearable pressure on them. If the excavator had kept digging, all the living would have died. By the way, they did use excavators, 30 of them. I think some people who had survived up to that point died because of them. But as you can imagine, proving that is impossible even if it's true. Day 3, 40 dead. On the third day, rescuers pulled a woman from the rubble. But it wasn't Yu Ji-hwan. She was rushed to the hospital and died that same day. Meanwhile, Yu Ji-hwan noticed the concrete slab right above her face had sunk even lower. Around then, she found a knife nearby and considered ending her life. But she didn't, thinking of her family and the pain it would cause them. Then the president arrived, and all the volunteers at the Sampung site were dispersed. These volunteers had been helping immensely, but they were ordered to leave because only official rescuers could be present with the president. The volunteers were furious. While they stood idle, someone below was dying slowly. Relatives wept as the work slowed dramatically. The president was there for 3 to 4 hours, receiving updates on the rescue. Then politicians started arriving one after another. With each official's visit, volunteers waited, and the chaos worsened. The real need was to save lives with every available hand. But hours were lost. Eventually, the visits stopped and full-scale rescue resumed. But precious time had slipped away. Day 4, 107 dead. Now, a part not for the faint-hearted. If you're too sensitive, I suggest skipping ahead for a minute. Rescuers began finding body parts. Legs here, arms there. Heads or bodies without heads. This made identifying victims extremely difficult. One girl at an identification thought a headless body was her friend because of a similar ring on the hand. But it wasn't. Parts of the same person could be scattered. Rescuers still remember this gruesome scene. They can't forget it. Remember, each floor collapsed starting from the 5th, stacking like pancakes. Rescuers found about 30 centimeters of space between each fallen floor. It's unimaginable anyone survived in such tight, confined gaps. Perhaps the most horrifying detail rescuers shared. They found clothing items in the rubble, pants, sweaters, shoes. Logical for a shopping center. But these belonged to visitors. The horror is that when floors crushed down, some people were pulverized so completely that only their clothes remained, surrounded by blood. Then, unexpectedly, a fire broke out from within the ruins. Imagine the scale of terror. Anyone still alive, trapped with broken limbs, enduring agony while waiting for rescue, now risked burning alive. And that's not all. To fight the fire, water poured in. Those who survived the flames now risked drowning. Sadly, many did drown from the firefighting water. Eventually, they pumped it out, but not immediately. Our heroine Yu Ji-hwan and other survivors heard sounds from outside. Water started trickling in from above. All the survivors were desperately thirsty. It was summer, after all. They drank without question, but the water tasted like rust. It was rainwater, contaminated as it dripped over pipes, metal debris, and concrete, mixing with rust and cement dust before reaching them. Yu Ji-hwan knew this water was terrible for her health, but she had no choice. Die of dehydration now or poison herself slowly later. These buried alive people had to survive somehow. The water saved them temporarily but poisoned them from within. Days passed. Rescuers found more and more bodies, 200, 300. The number kept rising, and I thought there might be around 1,000 victims. Rescuers began losing hope. Everyone they found was dead. Then, 12 days after the collapse, imagine that Yu Jihuan clearly heard rescuers' voices above. She tried shouting, but they didn't hear, so she started banging with her hand. Finally, they heard the tapping. They dug down to her leg and communicated. They learned her name, her age. She was 18. At that point, she didn't care if she lived or died. She was just happy they knew her name. It took so long to extract her that she spent 285 hours in that cramped space, barely fitting her body. As you can guess, most survivors were from the first and basement floors. A few from upper levels likely got lucky in air pockets, beams falling to create voids. But those were rare. Mostly, the lower levels survived. Interestingly, rescuers found a grocery store in the basement almost untouched. Fruits on the counters were intact. If people had been there, they'd have survived 100% with food even. But sadly, the store was empty during the collapse. In the Sampung disaster, there were 937 injured, 502 dead, and 31 missing. The last survivor was found after 17 days. 17. On the 25th day, all rescue operations ended. What remained of Sampung was bulldozed and hauled to a landfill on Jino Island. Relatives came daily, sifting through debris for any memento of their loved ones, just to bury something with dignity. Afterward, survivors were in horrific mental states. They constantly questioned if they deserved to live. Society expected them to be good people now. They felt no joy, consumed by guilt. And amid this, while still shattered, they were turned into TV stars. In the studio, the survivors. They were made into superstars, invited to every talk show, every evening program. They chat, laugh, with music playing. It all looked so surreal and strange. Why turn this into entertainment? People became obsessed with their lives, asking about compensation. Some even said survivors won the lottery. They lived, got money and fame from TV. I don't even know if I should comment on that. So what went wrong with this shopping center? Why did it collapse? This man, Lee Jun, was the owner of Sampung. He was in total shock when it fell, pacing restlessly. He should have been in prison instead. Yes, Lee Jun was the owner, and he knew in advance the building might collapse. Let me tell you about the red flags. Originally, the site was for a residential building, but Lee Jun changed his mind. No, let's build a shopping center. More profit. The construction firm drew up a perfect plan. But Lee Jun disliked it. Too few stores. Add more escalators and thin out the support columns to fit more shops. More stores mean more money. But even then, he wanted more, suggesting widening the columns even further, leaving huge gaps with nothing holding the floors. The firm refused. No, Mr. Lee Jun, we won't build something so dangerous. It could collapse any time. Furious, he fired them and hired builders who agreed to his vision. Despite massive violations, his perfect Sampung was ready. But wait, there's more. On the roof, air conditioners were placed, 3 of them, each 15 tons, totaling 45 tons of load. Notice, only the northern wing collapsed. The southern had violations too, but not as severe. Remember, staff trusted management to evacuate if needed. So what was management doing that day? They had a meeting. On June 29th, a manager noticed cracks around the roof AC units. Aha! He went to the 5th floor, where restaurant workers complained, "Look at these weird cracks under this column." Aha! The cracks were so bad the floor sagged around it. So he closed part of the 5th floor that day. He called an emergency meeting with leaders, including Lee Jun. Someone suggested closing the mall for repairs immediately. Lee Jun yelled, "Don't you understand how much money we'll lose? It's evening, peak sales time." He refused, and then management quietly evacuated themselves, abandoning the sinking ship. If you think Lee Jun is awful, he's worse. That day, his son's wife, his daughter-in-law named Kuken, was working there. He didn't even warn her, a family member. How do we know? She was found alive in the rubble and told the story. At least that's some justice. But justice ends there. Lee Jun got 10 years and 6 months, reduced to 7 years and 6 months. Compare to the Suwal ferry captain, who fled like Sampung's management and got 36 years. Lee Jun served 7, then was freed and died of health issues. Feel the difference? Money, influence, connections, that's what Lee Jun had, unlike the captain. Lee Jun's son, whose wife was trapped, got 7 years. You'd think this was a harsh lesson for construction companies. Sadly, history repeats. Bangkok metro violations, US building collapses. What's there now? Where Sampung once stood in Seoul is the luxurious Acrovista complex. No memorial for victims, just elite homes. Society raged. Why build luxury on this site? Locals call it morally ugly, like drinking champagne on a grave. Amid screams, pain, death, they built opulence for Korea's elite. Koreans say their society still suffers endless greed. Sampung. Greed to cram more stores, ignoring safety. Suwon. Greed overloading the ferry for profit. What do you think? Could you die at any moment? Yes, especially in the Republic of Korea.